For most of the 20th century, the single most valuable thing on an Icelandic trawler went over the side. Skin, heads, livers, bones, roughly half of every cod, shoveled back into the sea as rubbish. Today, that rubbish is the reason Iceland earns more from far fewer fish than fleets catching several times its quota. One company built out of that discarded skin sold for $1.3 billion. This is the story of how a country decided that waste was not a fact of nature as a design failure. To understand what changed, you have to understand the fear. In 1981, Icelandic boats landed about 460,000 tons of cod. By the mid-1990s, the stock was in trouble, and the scientists said the same thing they always say: catch less. So Iceland did cutting its cod quota to roughly half of what it once was. For a nation where fish was the economy, this was existential. Half the cod, same bills, same towns, same boats. The obvious answer was to fish harder somewhere else. It's what most fishing nations did. It's also what emptied the Grand Banks off Newfoundland in 1992 and put 30,000 people out of work in a single morning. The second obvious answer was to grind the leftovers into fish meal, pet food, fertilizer, animal feed. Iceland already did this. But fish meal pays by the ton, and paying by the ton is a trap. When you sell by weight, more weight is the only way up. And weight was exactly what Iceland had agreed to stop taking out of the ocean. So the question that runs through the rest of this story is a simple one. If you cannot take more fish out of the water, how do you take more value out of each fish? The man who eventually forced the question was not a fisherman. Thor Sigfússon was an economist who had run an insurance company and then watched Iceland's entire banking system collapse in the autumn of 2008. He came out of that wreckage with a conviction that sounds soft until you see the numbers it produced. Iceland's problem was not a shortage of ideas. It was a shortage of introductions. The skipper landing the fish had never met the biochemist. The biochemist had never met the leather tanner. The tanner had never met the surgeon. Each of them was sitting on a piece of the same animal. In 2011, in a converted warehouse in Grandi, the old working harbour of Reykjavík, Thor opened the Iceland Ocean Cluster. In Icelandic, Reykjavík, the house of the ocean, it is not a laboratory, it is not a fund. It is a building full of desks, deliberately arranged so that people who would otherwise never speak have to queue for the same coffee machine. Around it, Thor built a program with an unsubtle name: 100% fish. The premise: every part of the animal has a customer, and the job is to go and find them. Start with the skin, the part that went overboard first. In the Westfjords town of Ísafjörður, a man called Fertram Sigurd Johnson had noticed that cod skin is structurally close to human skin and rich in omega-3 fatty acids. Skin grafts already existed, made from pig and human tissue. But those carry disease risk, so they are processed, harshly washed and stripped until much of the useful structure is gone. Cod carries no disease that can jump to a human, so Kerecis could leave the skin almost intact, a scaffold the body grows straight into. For diabetic foot ulcers, burns, wounds that would not close, that skin was worth essentially nothing on the deck. As a medical graft, it sells for hundreds of dollars apiece. In July 2023, the Danish medical group Coloplast bought Kerecis for $1.3 billion. Now do the rest of the animal. The bones and frames become collagen and calcium, sold into supplements and cosmetics by companies like Codland and Feel Iceland. The guts yield enzymes. Cod trypsin, isolated by Icelandic researchers, ended up in cold and flu products sold across Europe. Waste turned into a pharmacy shelf. The liver goes to Lysi, a Reykjavík company founded in 1938, which turns cod livers into omega-3 oil, sold in more than 70 countries. The heads, perhaps the strangest thread, are air-dried in geothermally heated sheds and shipped to Nigeria, where they are a prized soup ingredient. At its peak, that single trade was worth tens of millions of dollars a year. And the swim bladders go to Asia, and the leather goes to tanneries, and the trimmings go to premium mince rather than meal. Here is what all of that adds up to. Iceland has pushed utilization of each cod from around 50% to over 90%. The value squeezed from a single fish has multiplied more than 30-fold. The old figure of roughly $12 a cod now runs into the hundreds, and once you count the medical-grade products, far beyond that. Iceland now lands a fraction of the cod its neighbors do and earns comparable money doing it. The fleet got smaller. The revenue did not. It would be dishonest to call this a clean win. It is not. The quota system that made this possible concentrated fishing rights in fewer hands, and small coastal communities lost boats and jobs in the process. That argument is still live in Iceland today. The Nigerian head trade collapsed for a period when currency restrictions hit, a reminder that 100% utilization still depends on somebody somewhere wanting to buy the ninth product. And it worked here partly because Iceland is small. Everybody is 2 phone calls from everybody. That is an advantage you cannot simply export. But the method travels better than the geography. Ocean cluster houses modeled on the Reykjavík original now operate in New England, in Alaska, in the Faroes and Ireland. Same idea, different fish. And the underlying logic is not about fish at all. It is about the assumption, built into almost every industry we have, that a thing has one product and the rest is cost. Poultry, dairy, timber, brewing, all of them run at Iceland's old ratio. Roughly half of it sold. Roughly half of it a disposal problem. What Thor Sigfússon proved in a warehouse in Grandi is that the gap between those 2 halves is not a law of physics. It is just a set of people who have not been introduced yet. I've put the full breakdown in the link, in the description, the utilization figures, the Kerecis timeline, the companies working each part of the fish, and the sources for every number in this episode. If you work in an industry with a waste stream, that page is the useful part.